Close your eyes and imagine the bread you're eating contains chalk and ground bones. The tea tastes metallic. The gruel is so thin you can see through it. This wasn't a nightmare. This was breakfast in Victorian England. Welcome to a piece of the past. Here, history is not loud, it is a whisper. The candles glow, apartments crinkle. A tale of the past whispered softly to you. This is your sanctuary of soft storytelling, where we wander the quiet corridors of forgotten places. Breathe in the stillness of the centuries and find calm in the echoes of the past. So get cozy, come closer, and let the past whisper to you. The first light of dawn slipped through soot-stained wind outside. The city stirred, the faint rumble of carts on cobblestones, the distant hiss of factory steam, and the calls of vendors setting up stalls. Inside cramped kitchens, the working-class family prepared for another day. But breakfast was never a feast. It was survival. Bread was the anchor of the morning meal, yet even this humble staple carried secrets. Bakers, eager for profit, often stretched flour with chalk, alum, even ground bones. These whitened loaves were heavier in the hand, but far lighter in nourishment. Poor, who had little choice, called it bastard bread. They ate it because bread, however tainted, was still life. Day-old loaves were common. Their crusts had hardened overnight, and the crumb was dense, dry, and chewy. Imagine teeth sinking into it. No softness, just resistance. Mothers softened the stale slices by dipping them into weak tea, letting steam rise in the chilly air. For children, that faint warmth was comfort enough. Sometimes there was dripping, not butter. Too expensive. Dripping was the cooled fat skimmed and saved from roasting meat, then spread thinly across bread. Laid in a pan, it sizzled gently, releasing a savory aroma, richer than anything else a poor family might smell all week. The sound of that faint sizzle, the promise of flavor, lingered in memory long after the plate was empty. By midday, the factory bells tolled, echoing across the smoky city. For weary men, women, and children, this brief pause was precious. It was dinner, though not as we think of dinner today. In the Victorian working-class world, the word meant the day's main meal, and it came at noon. Bundles were unwrapped at factory gates or set upon rough wooden benches. For the fortunate, there was cold meat wrapped in cloth, perhaps saved from the night before. In Cornwall, miners prized their pasties, hearty pastry pockets filled with potatoes, turnips, bits of beef. The crust at the end, marked with initials, was meant to be held with coal-dusted fingers, then discarded to keep the filling clean. But in hard times, even the crust was eaten. Elsewhere, food sellers stood ready, women with baskets of pies, hot potatoes steaming in their skins, or fried fish wrapped in paper cold to passing workers. Some sold eel pies, the rich smell mingling with the acrid smoke of chimneys. Penny buns, sweet and yeasty, tempted children on their break from school or street errands. Picture it now. A man bites into a wedge of bread and cheese, its sharpness filling his mouth. Beside him, a woman opens her tin to reveal a slice of pasty, still fragrant with onion and potato. A child gnaws on a heel of bread, too dry to swallow without sips of weak tea. Steam rises from a potato clutched in paper, warming cold fingers. All around, the sound of chewing and chatter fills the air. Voices lowered, laughter mingled with sighs. It was a brief, communal moment. The crust broken and shared. A piece of cheese swapped, a sip of tea offered from one cup to another. For a fleeting time, the hardship of labor softened in the company of others, but always, too soon, the shrill whistle of the foreman cut the pause short. Bundles were tied, crusts tucked away, weary hands returned to the machines. The working lunch was practical, portable, and plain. In its own way, it was more than food. It was fellowship, the quiet reminder that in hunger and hardship, no one was truly alone. The factory bells had fallen silent. Outside, the streets darkened under the haze of coal smoke, and weary footsteps echoed homeward. After 12 long hours of toil, men, women, and children returned to their cramped dwellings, bodies aching, stomachs hollow, spirits dulled by exhaustion. Supper awaited, not lavish, not plentiful, but warm. In the dim kitchen, the hearth was coaxed back to life. A battered iron pot was placed upon the grate, its blackened sides hissing as water touched hot metal. Into it went whatever the day had spared: potato peelings, a shred of cabbage, end of a carrot, or perhaps a bone left from Sunday's roast. If luck or careful thrift allowed, a scrap of bacon or mutton was added, flavoring the broth as it simmered slowly. The scent rose almost at once, earthy, humble, comforting. Turnips and onions softened, their aroma mingling with smoke from the fire. Pot bubbled quietly, filling the silence of the room with a rhythm as steady as a heartbeat. On the pan beside it, bubble and squeak hissed. Yesterday's potatoes and cabbage fried together, crackling as they browned. The sizzling sound was almost cheerful, filling the kitchen with the illusion of plenty. Across Britain, every region had its own version of this humble supper. In Liverpool, scouse, a thick stew of meat, potatoes, and carrots, became so central that the people themselves were forever called scousers. In Wales, families gathered around bowls of caul, a rustic broth of lamb, leeks, and root vegetables. In Scotland, haggis offered nourishment from ingredients others might discard, turned by ingenuity into a dish of pride. Each supper spoke of resourcefulness, born not from choice, but from necessity. The table was not crowded with food, but with people. Children huddled close to the fire, hands reaching toward the pot, their fingers red from the cold. They leaned forward, eyes wide, watching steam curl upward as though warmth could be drawn from the air itself. Mothers stirred with care, the wooden spoon tapping gently against the pot, releasing a richer aroma each turn. Fathers sat quietly at the table, boots still caked with mud or coal dust, waiting with silent anticipation. When bowls were finally set out, they were chipped, mismatched, but precious. Each ladleful was measured carefully, stretched to ensure no one went without. Children's eyes followed every movement, hushed as the broth and vegetables filled their bowls. Steam rose into the chilly room, fogging the window panes, softening the harsh edges of poverty with a momentary glow. The first spoonful was always the best, hot, hearty, filling the belly after a day of emptiness. Bread, often stale, was torn by hand and dipped into the broth, soaking up every last drop. Calloused fingers clutched crusts tightly, unwilling to waste a crumb. Around the table, silence fell. The only sounds were the soft scrape of spoons against bowls, the hiss of the hearth, and the occasional sigh of relief. Supper was never luxury, but it was comfort. In drafty homes, in streets lined with soot, this humble meal provided more than food. It offered warmth, it offered solace, and it offered for a brief hour the feeling of being together, safe in the glow of the hearth before night returned them to labor's shadow. century, sugar had grown cheaper, carried across oceans on ships from the West Indies. Once reserved for the wealthy, it began to trickle into working-class homes. A spoonful of jam, glossy and bright, spread across bread, transformed a plain meal into something joyful. Children licked the sticky sweetness from their fingers, savoring every trace. Imagine a child pressing their nose to the glass of a penny sweet shop. Inside shelves gleamed with jars of boiled sweets, striped humbugs, sherbet powders, and barley sugar sticks. The glow of gaslight lit up the colors: ruby red, emerald green, golden amber. For just 1 penny, a twist filled with sweets could be theirs. The rustle of paper, the clink of jars, the sugary scent in the air. These were treasures of childhood, fleeting, cherished. On Sundays, the rhythm of life shifted. Families scraped together coins for a small joint of meat, a chicken, or piece of beef, shared among many. Yet few homes had ovens large enough for roasting. Instead, neighbors carried their meats to the local baker. For a small fee, joints were slid into the still hot bread ovens after the day's baking was done. By late afternoon, families walked home with steaming roasts wrapped in cloth, filling the streets with savory scents. Even the poorest households felt a touch of celebration then. Potatoes roasted in the pan, cabbage boiled alongside. For a brief meal, supper became feast. Families sat a little taller, spoke a little lighter, and let themselves forget, just for a moment, the hardship waiting at the factory gates. These rare indulgences stitched themselves into memory. A sweet shop visit, a slice of roast shared on a Sunday, a jam-smeared crust given to a child. Tiny luxuries, but powerful enough to remind even the poorest that life held more than toil. Of 10 or 12 courses, roasted pheasants and partridges, whole turkeys, joints of beef carved with silver knives, side dishes sparkled with color, glazed carrots, buttered peas, custards, and puddings crowned with sugar. Wine flowed in crystal glasses. Servants in pressed uniforms glided between chairs, removing plates to replace them with the next pause. Conversation was refined, leisurely, indulgent. In these dining rooms, no one knew hunger. To the narrow courts and slums, the poor ate scraps, bread stretched with chalk, gruel watered thin, tea brewed until it was no more than colored water. For them, food was never indulgence, it was survival. The very act of eating revealed the class divide. The wealthy grew plump, the poor grew frail. The consequences were written on the bodies of the working class. Malnutrition was constant. Children grew thin and pale, their bones softened and bent by rickets, their teeth weakened from lack of nourishment. Scurvy, a disease of sailors, still appeared in city streets where fresh fruit was too rare to afford. Adults were aged before their time, their bodies worn not only by labor but by the hunger that shadowed them daily. And then there was the workhouse. For the destitute, the poorhouse diet was the very edge of survival. Gruel, thin, grey, tasteless, served in meager bowls, a scrap of bread, on rare occasions, a piece of cheese or sweat pudding. Families ate in silence. Long rows of men, women, and children bent over their bowls, clatter of spoons the only sound in the vast, echoing hall. Words were forbidden. Comfort was absent. Even hunger was made into discipline. In these places, food was not nourishment. It was control, gruel and scraps given not to satisfy, but to sustain life at its barest edge. To eat in silence under watchful eyes was to feel the weight of poverty pressed deeper into the soul. About stretching each morsel as far as it could go. Scraps of bread softened in weak tea, bones boiled twice to flavor broth, vegetables fried a second time into bubble and squeak. Tea leaves brewed again and again until no color remained. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was taken for granted. This ingenuity was born from necessity, a different kind of wealth, not of gold or silver, but of resilience. The wealth of mothers who turned scraps into stew, of fathers who carried crusts to work with quiet dignity, of children who savored a single sweet as though it were treasure. There was consequence in such scarcity, of course. Hunger left its mark, thin bodies, crooked bones, tired eyes, and yet within the hardship was a quiet strength. Communities learned to share, to gather around the warmth of food, no matter how plain. Even the humblest meals carried comfort because they were shared together. When we look back today in a world overflowing with choice, their story whispers to us across time. It teaches us to value simplicity, to waste less, to see nourishment only in fine flavors, in the act of gathering, of enduring, of loving one another through hardship. Beyond the plate, there lies a truth that food is not merely fuel, it is memory, it is comfort, it is resilience, and the will to carry on. As we sit in the glow of candlelight, listening to their story, perhaps we learn to treasure the simplest of meals, bread, dripping, and tea, with deeper gratitude, knowing how such humble fare once sustained lives and still warms hearts today. Thank you for spending this quiet moment in history with me here at Piece of the Past. If you enjoyed your stay in the candlelight, please subscribe so the next story finds you. Until then, may your nights be calm and your dreams timeless.